You are sitting in the cabin at 35,000 feet. Outside the window, the temperature is minus 55 degrees. The air pressure is so low that without protection, you would lose consciousness in seconds. And yet inside the cabin, you are comfortable, breathing normally, completely unaware of what is happening outside. That is not an accident. That is the pneumatic system doing its job. Most passengers have no idea it even exists. And if it fails, you notice very quickly. The pneumatic system runs on bleed air, air that is extracted or bled directly from the engine compressor. As the engine compresses air for combustion, a portion of that compressed air is tapped off before it reaches the combustion chamber. It is hot, it is high pressure, and it is incredibly useful. Before it enters the distribution system, it passes through a precooler, which reduces the temperature to a manageable level. From there, it is distributed through ducts to the systems that need it. The APU can also supply bleed air on the ground, before the main engines are started. And if neither is available, a ground air cart can provide pneumatic power externally. This is not a small system. This is the system that makes the aircraft livable. The first job of bleed air is in starting the engines. Before an engine can run under its own power, it needs to be spinning fast enough for ignition to occur. That initial spin comes from the air turbine starter. Bleed air, yes, from the APU or from a ground air cart, is directed into the starter, which drives the engine compressor into rotation. As the engine accelerates through its start sequence, fuel is introduced and ignition occurs. Once the engine reaches self-sustaining speed, the starter disconnects. The engine is now running and producing its own bleed air. Every jet engine start you have ever experienced began with this process. Without bleed air, thus time, the engine does not start. It is that simple. At this point, it sounds simple. It isn't. Now, the concept most passengers never think about, pressurization. At 35,000 feet, the outside air pressure is roughly 1/4 of what it is at sea level. At that pressure, as the human body cannot function. The pneumatic system solves this by continuously supplying a conditioned bleed air into the cabin and controlling how quickly air escapes through the outflow valve. The result, the cabin is maintained at a pressure equivalent to approximately 6,000 to 8,000 feet. Not sea level, but entirely safe and comfortable for passengers. You are not breathing outside air at altitude. You are breathing continuously refreshed, conditioned air supplied by the pneumatic system. Every minute of every flight. Lose that pressure, and the aircraft is no longer a comfortable environment. It is a survival environment. The bleed air that enters the cabin doesn't arrive straight from the engine. It passes through the air conditioning packs first. The packs take the hot, high-pressure bleed air and cool it, condition it, and mix it with recirculated cabin air before it reaches you. The temperature you feel in the cabin, whether too warm at boarding or perfectly comfortable at cruise, is managed by these packs. They are the reason a cabin full of passengers at minus 55 degrees outside remains at a comfortable temperature inside. 2 packs on most commercial aircraft, each capable of conditioning the entire cabin independently if the other fails. Because redundancy in aviation is not optional. Bleed air has one more critical job, keeping the wings clear of ice. In icing conditions, ice can form on the leading edges of the wings. Ice does not need time. It builds fast. It changes the shape of the aerofoil. It disrupts airflow. It reduces lift. Left unchecked, it is dangerous. The anti-ice system routes hot bleed air through ducts inside the wing leading edges. The heat prevents ice from forming in the first place. This is not a system that removes ice after it is formed. It is a system that prevents it forming at all. In icing conditions, when explorers, wing anti-ice is not optional. It is mandatory. With hot, high-pressure air running through ducts across the entire aircraft, leak detection is critical. A bleed air duct leak is not a minor fault. Hot bleed air escaping inside a wing or fuselage structure can cause serious damage, to wiring, to structure, to surrounding components. This is not a warning you ignore. The aircraft has loop detectors running alongside the bleed air duct. If a leak is detected, the system alerts the crew, the affected bleed source is isolated, and the leak is contained. As an AME, a bleed air leak is treated with urgency. You do not run bleed air through a compromised duct. You find the leak, you fix it, you test it. Then, and only then, it flies. The pneumatic system is one of those systems that passengers never think about. Because when it works correctly, there is nothing to notice. The cabin is comfortable, the engines start, the wings stay clear. Everything happens automatically in the background on every flight. As an AME, I have worked on bleed air ducts, pre-coolers, packs, and anti-ice systems. I have found duct leaks in wheel bays and bleed airburn marks behind panels. I have stood at the bottom of an engine start and felt the air turbine starter engage. The pneumatic system is not glamorous. It is not the system that gets talked about. But without it, nothing else works. And when it stops working, you realize how critical it really is. If this gave you a better understanding of what is actually keeping you alive and comfortable at 35,000 feet, subscribe. I break down aviation in a way that actually makes sense, without the noise. See you in the next one.